funny. Yesterday, today's Monday. I better take this off for the echo. Today's Monday, October 10th. And yesterday, I was having a conversation with my wife, and I said, I gotta spend less time making videos and doing blog posts. I need to somehow accelerate these books. And this is video number 3 for the day. I came inside because my hands were freezing. My toes still hurt. But as I was cleaning up for the day, God reminded me that there was one more thing He asked me to talk about. So here we are. I watched a video recently from a gal who was talking about the example her father provided. And I guess when he was a student, while he was a student in college, he spent a lot of time and effort filling in the blanks of his life. That's not going to make sense. I'll come back to it. Trying to learn as much as he could from the resources that he had available. What do I mean by filling in the blanks? So when you try to prioritize your life, you need to start with the things of greatest value, and you make sure they're on your schedule on a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly, any time scale that you want to think about. You make sure that the things that are vital for where you want to be and who you want to be are in place first. And then you fill in the gaps. And what this is like is if you have a mason jar and the really important things are like golf balls and the less important things are like grains of rice, you put all the golf balls in first. And once you allocate time and resources for those, whatever's left changes the equation, the optimization process for the rice. You dump whatever rice fills the jar, can fit in there. That's what you dump in. But if you put that same amount of rice in first, the golf balls won't fit. I was talking with my kids about that just last night. So anyway, this guy, he found out what the golf balls were and was working on those things. And then he optimized the grains of rice to fit in the gaps. So he was doing college stuff for golf balls. And then he spent the balance of his time trying to use the extras as well as he could. And this was interesting for me to hear because I did this myself in college. And I found myself, I'll tell you I guess I'll just tell you the story. I'll try and make it quick. But I was a graduate student. I happened to be working on a project. This is in computer science at BYU. And I happened to be working on a project where I was using a supercomputer to run some really beefy code. It took a long time to run, even on the supercomputer. But anyway, it was a lot like my experience in the military, where, well, at least that part of grad school, where it's just doing the research. In the military, almost everything is like mad rush of having to do everything all at once, or very little to do. But you can't really do too many productive things when there's very little to do, because you never know when everything's going to collapse and everyone's in panic mode again. So that's kind of how it was with this computer science research, because I never knew when a program was going to crash or finish, and everything was sequential. So I had to be ready for the next step. But if I tried to anticipate it too much, I'd lose track of where I was and make mistakes. And anyway, so you get the drift. So I had these unpredictable pockets of time. And the Lord said to me, you're at an institution that has the largest library of Mormon literature in the world. And I found out that I had, as a grad student, if I remember correctly, I think I had some insane number of books I could check out at a time. And I may or may not have had special privileges with what I could check out. Like it would normally be a reference book, but I was able to take it out of the library. I don't remember. But at some point, I made sure I had an immense stack of rare books, usually, on my desk. And between the first priority was getting through my research for my degree, but when I had a minute, I would just pick up where I left off in the next book, and I took notes as I went. And that actually turned out to be a really critical pivot point in my life that I never would have anticipated. I wanted to say one other thing about that, and I'm trying to remember what that was. Thanks for allowing me a moment of silence here. Maybe it'll come back to me. I don't remember. Anyway, there's a theme that I've written about before, but probably not for a long time, and probably it was in some older blog posts. But Moses' father-in-law, his name was Jethro, and it's interesting. We gloss over scriptural stories and just we get used to them, and then we don't see them for what they really are. We lose details, and especially emotions as we're reading these stories. We lose sight of what it must have been like to go through these things, which is a real shame because we lose the applicability to our lives to a large extent that way. But when you think about Moses and actually think about what his life must have been like, growing up in the household of Pharaoh, just trying to shorten what could be said about this, he basically lived several rich lives in one life. And so by the time he met Jethro, he had, and I mean specifically, Jethro came to him after he had liberated the Israelites and gone through a whole lot of experiences. And Jethro had some suggestions for him in how to manage the issues of the camp of Israel. And he actually listened to what Jethro had to say. And Moses is described as a particularly meek person, but that's still kind of a shocker to see someone that had as many experiences and frankly as many victories as he had, both on the battlefield and in civil affairs and government, in just material type ways. I mean, he grew up in the wealthiest household in the world at the time, and as a member of the family, not just as a servant or something. So, and then all the experiences with God and in leading this extremely numerous people is really something. But Jethro had a good idea, and he was open-minded to hearing it, and he did, and he implemented it because it was a good idea. He was really grateful for it. Anyway, I think anybody who's lived a rich life can look back and enumerate a very long list of Jethros in their life. And these people, they matter a lot. Now, I'm thinking of all mine right now. I'll give you a tiny example. There's a guy named Roger who I met kind of circumstantially, meaning that there was no reason for this person to become a major factor in my life from the outside, but I saw in him several things that I admired. I learned just from context clues a little bit about him, and then as I made an effort to get to know him, I learned more about him. And basically, I treated him like an orange that I was trying to juice, and I extracted every drop of value that I could from the guy, because there was a lot to him that was valuable that I didn't have in my life at the time. So as a small example of this, one time he mentioned in passing that he read an entire book that morning to prepare for something he had to do. And I said, you mean you finished the book this morning? He said, no, I read the whole thing this morning. I said, how does that work? He said, well, I speed read it. Have you ever heard of speed reading? And I said, no, what's that? And he told me. And so all of a sudden, I had knowledge of something that I didn't know existed before. that was with an explanation of why it was beneficial and an example that it was possible. And I thought to myself, I could really use this. I don't have a lot of time, but there are a lot of things I want to read. And so I asked him to tell me a little bit about how it was done. And then I Googled it and I looked it up a little bit more. And basically, a very short while later, I knew how to speed read. And that has made a tremendous difference in my life. That was one very tiny thing I got from him. I got a lot of other things too, but my whole life has been this composite of Jethros. And it's the weirdest thing because as I met each of these people, I saw all these things in them instantly that I thought, well, not all these things. There's at least one thing about them that I thought, I don't have that and I want that. It's good. It's better than what I have, or I don't have anything like it. I'm going for it. And as that chain continued with more and more links, so I would mine out everything someone had to offer and then move on to the next one. So like an improvement vampire, right? And but like they weren't hurt by this. If anything, I was vastly increasing their value, the value that they contribute to the world, because I basically said, if you have something good and you can share it with me, I'll pay any price. Like, let's do this. And I went from person to person, and sometimes those things weren't conveyable or they didn't want to share them with me. So, but knowing about them and seeing they were possible was enough for me to go get it for myself, or at least to pray to God and ask him to show me how to get it, or to pray to him and ask him to give it to me. And so, the unfortunate thing about this is our ability to perceive value in what's around us is it starts out highly limited, and it only increases as we make use of what's around us. So there's a fly buzzing in this room and it's driving me nuts. So you're going to see it fly across the screen. Yeah, like I needed something else to be distracting. So let me recover my train of thought here, get it back on the track. So our ability to perceive what has value depends on how well we use the things that have value that we see already. That was a mouthful, but basically the gateway to everything that is better is whatever you currently see as what's best. I hope that made sense. So these Jethros are the gateway of obtaining more of what they have that's beneficial. And they're also the gateway to what exists beyond that you don't even know about yet. And the funny thing about this, I don't have time to make the case for it scripturally just yet, but it's something that you'll see in books. I think this is like 12 books from now, so it's going to be a little while. But that's one reason I'm making the video about it right now. So if you have ears to hear, you don't have to wait. And there's a reason for that. But anyway, I made a video a little while ago about the financial and material aspect of this principle of making use of what you have access to today. And that one was more oriented to the fact that whatever you have materially right now, you're not going to have it in the future. And that's a weird, unique situation that we're in because we live in the end times. But so in that case, it's like you think you have this, whatever this is. I don't want to be too specific and put ideas in your head because you need to figure that out with God. But you think you have this. Well, in a very short time, you're not going to have this. And you'll have either the knowledge that you spent whatever it is you had to obtain things of eternal worth, or you will have massive regret because someone told you you were going to lose it all and you didn't believe them. And then when you did, you knew it was true. Enough said. That's the TLDR from that last video. But there's like a less depressing version of this principle, which is that, and it's not, by the way, it's not depressing because our hearts are focused on worldly things, and when they're taken away, that makes us upset. I mean, that's going to be true for a lot of people, but it should be depressing for everyone because uh, it's like you're a kid in a family of a bunch of kids, and you're the only one that's not a selfish jerk, and uh, your parents give you all some nice thing, and all of your siblings break it, and the parents say, "This is why I can't give you nice things," but you didn't do anything wrong. So that's kind of why it's depressing. But uh, not to take that analogy too far for various reasons. But um, there's an application of this principle in non-material things, which is what I'm trying to talk about. Sources of improvement, information, basically, knowledge, character. So you have resources right this second, just scattered across your life. And it's like you're sitting in a gold mine, and you have a pickaxe, you have all the equipment you need, and the question is, what are you doing with it? And the funny thing about this is, no one really knows they're sitting in a gold mine, and all you can see is what's on the face of the stone. You don't know what's behind it, because the only way to see that is to dig in. And so how do you get to the good stuff? Well, find the best looking spot and start digging. And if it thins out to the point where the stuff that's on the original wall back in the start of the cave looks better than where you are, go back to that. It's really that simple. So the funny thing, there's a lot of funny things. One of the things I find hilarious about the way God has done things is that so much is obfuscated, and yet so much is so simple. And one of the simple things is you get to everything that's better by going through what you see as best right now. That's how it is. I'm telling you. I've dug some dirt, folks, and I'm telling you that's the way it is. And I don't know of any counterexample to this argument. And I've looked and I've lived. So yeah, that's kind of it. There's a lot more that could be said, I guess, but finding the best available to you and mining that out completely, and then just being aware of the best you've seen so far and going back to other things if something new pops up, because our lives aren't static caves. We get new people coming into our lives. We get new situations. We move. We change jobs, and on and on. Life changes around us. The world changes. You just kind of have to just poke up your head every once in a while you're digging, while you're catching your breath, and honestly assess the situation. And I think, I will say, I think maybe one thing that makes this difficult is we fail to separate execution from creative exploration. So like planning versus execution, or designing a plan versus executing the plan. The dichotomy is something like that. And it's easy to get so locked into execution that you don't pay attention to when the plan needs to change, and you have new evidence that suggests that. In a lot of situations in my life, I've worked with people, and we've been working on a very large project. And I guess I have a lot of experience in flip-flopping between these two tasks. And I notice other people don't. And I try to help them see. So one tendency in human nature for sure is to keep going down the execution path well after you have plenty of reasons to know why it's not going to work. And I have seen people waste so much time and money doing that. It's really sad, because I don't know what it is about human nature. I made another video about this today, that we have such a bias towards avoiding change. even when it's really obvious that change is needed or that what we're doing right now isn't delivering what we're seeking. And for whatever reason, it's just really hard for people to let go and change. And good luck progressing with God without being okay with change, because you're just saying I'm going to stay the way I am, and that's worse than it sounds, because you haven't tested how you are against everything that actually is. Our lives are like, we live in this little bubble of vastly reduced experience, exposure to consequences. And the point of life is to have that bubble expand. And for some people, the bubble will come off. That is the goal. To just throw something out there without explaining it all at all, that's the difference between salvation and eternal life. But people just stay in their little bubble like that's life, and then they get all surprised and a lot of times upset when what should have been super obvious that that's not reality. When that bubble pops, they're really unhappy, and that's sad. And I don't know that anyone gets through life without the bubble popping, and it should be obvious to just look around to see that happening all the time. But even if you did, somehow the bubble's going to pop after death. I promise you that. And you'll understand that it's not a bubble. And that is a really simple way of explaining what hell is. So anyway, I didn't want to go down all those roads, but I just wanted to solemnly invite you to consider the resources that you have in your life and to make the greatest use of them, because they will not be around forever. In more ways than one, we live in a time where opportunities are quickly closing. And, for years I told people that there would come a day when my blog was not as accessible. I told them to copy anything they found value in. And when that day came, I got emails from people that were longtime readers. And I didn't, can you send me this one? Can you send me? And I said, no. Sorry, I can't. And there have been one or two cases where I guess I did look something up or I said something again, but I can't go back. I don't have time. There are more important things to do. And I knew that day would come. And I'm telling you, if there are books that you want to get them now. If there are electronic resources that you find value in, if there's any way to get those locally, do it. If there are people in your life who have something to offer you and you haven't extracted that value fully, do it. Because things are going to change. The ability to post videos to the internet like this, for example, it's not going to be here forever. And maybe it'll seem like it's taking longer than you might have expected to change. But I promise you, things like this, they take longer than you think they're going to, and then they happen much more suddenly than you expected. And you're going to see this play out over and over and over again. And so think very carefully about the value that surrounds you and make the most of it today, because it won't always be there. And if you play your cards right and you use the resources God has dispensed to you as their apparent value suggests, you will be led to resources of greater value, and that will continue. But there is coming a time where things of value are far less accessible. And this is, I'm principally talking about ideas and people. So make the most of it today.